Indiana Prepares was made possible by contributions from the hospitals of Indiana Districts 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and by the Lighthouse Readiness Group. Tornadoes, earthquakes, natural disasters, plane crashes, toxic spills, terrorism, and other man-made emergencies. They stress response systems to, and often beyond, the breaking point, to chaos. Collapsed buildings, fire and rescue, injury triage, overloaded ambulance and hospital services. For those who are tasked with responding to such events, the approach is not to wait to see if these events occur, but instead to be prepared when they do, to train relentlessly to try to create order as quickly as possible. For more than a decade, Indiana has been steadily improving its response capabilities, but there are new challenges looming on the horizon as Indiana prepares. It was a day that changed everything in so many ways. The way in which we approach emergency response was no different.
15 years ago, we were not well prepared, not at all. We had our kind of individual capabilities. We were very independent. We worked independently. We might borrow a small amount of supplies or medicine from another hospital in our area, but we certainly didn't collaborate or work together on anything from a disaster standpoint. That really showed us the kind of lack of collaboration and cooperation among agencies, especially healthcare and hospitals.
There was a lot of urgency after 9/11. A ton of resources were given to state and local jurisdictions to ensure we could protect the homeland, and we made counterterrorism a top priority in our country and state and local jurisdictions.
There was widespread recognition that emergency responders did not communicate and collaborate at a high enough level. In fact, many had isolated systems for doing so. Federal dollars created the Department of Homeland Security, and to improve collaboration and communication between all emergency responders, from police and fire to ambulance and hospital systems, the U.S. government mandated training in states and the use of a common response system based on military protocol titled the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. It sets a common command structure to know who is in charge of what resources in any situation, and uses a common language for all involved.
Everybody's got this common language that they know what they're talking about. You know, police officers use the codes on the radio. Well, if no one else knows what those are, that's not beneficial. I mean, if I can't understand what you're saying, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
The fire and police have been more accustomed to incident command, firefighters even more so than the police service, but hospitals is brand new. I mean, within the last 8 or 10 years, I'm going to guess that we've been tasked to learn the command structure and how the incident command system works. It's just a much easier way and a scalable structure to be able to set up and mitigate incidents and to prepare for them.
The other thing that's unique about disaster response or emergency preparedness is it's multidisciplinary. You're not just dealing with physicians or emergency responders. It's, you know, everybody's involved, from citizens in the community all the way up to the federal level. So that's a challenge to me when you think about coordinating a training and how you begin that process.
You had their hand up? Yep.
Indiana focused on getting all different types of responders to train together.
If you start training together, you start learning this language, and it's just a standard curriculum that you talk about, how do I respond to this mass casualty event?
We have fabulous hospital and medical systems in our community. But when you have large mass incidents, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's flooding, tornadoes, or if we were to have a terrorist incident like in Boston, those hospitals need to be prepared to work together and to make sure that communication is happening at the highest level so that people's lives can be saved.
We're all on the same page. You know, we're talking the same lingo, I guess you would say. Not only does it in the first responder field, but it also does it with our elected officials. NIMS has brought our elected officials maybe up to speed a little bit more on what we have to do and how we communicate and do things in the field. A lot of times, you know, they are the ones that are given the authority in order to be able to bring resources in financially to help their situation in their communities.
In Indiana, it was quickly recognized the state was broad enough that a statewide response system was too bulky. So, Indiana was divided into 10 districts so that personnel and expensive equipment could be shared and response be more nimble.
We just find that a lot of local communities don't have the resources to move great distances, even in a training capacity. They have to stay back and take care of the fire needs in their own community. They have to be responsive if something happens, and if their fire truck or their EMS wagon is 3 hours away doing training, that's not a good thing for local response capability. So what we've tried to do is make it manageable in 10 districts. And then in addition to having that capability in 10 districts, the nice thing is we've seen several other state agencies adopt that same district portfolio. And so what you have really is a statewide approach to preparedness as opposed to just Homeland Security's doing it and state police doing something different.
We would not be where we are today without the development of the district concept. We would like to have every asset, every piece of equipment, every training offered in every county. We would love to have that happen, but it's just not feasible with funding. So we're able to reach those goals and share by going to the district concept, and it's just been phenomenal for us. My county is one of the smallest counties where I live in Indiana. My county could not support those assets, they're all volunteer departments. If something really were to go south in my county, my agencies couldn't handle it all by themselves. And so we rely on other counties to assist us and bring their assets to bear.
Basically, they all come together to talk and, you know, to network and know one another before a large incident would occur, so they could all communicate and understand what their resources may be compared to the resources that you have available in your hometown.
Bringing everybody to the table, that's one of the keys to the district concept, is you bring all those entities to the table, all those key players, and we know everybody, we plan together, we work together, we train together.
So when I make that dire phone call at 3 a.m. that we need help because our hospital's collapsing or drowning or we need staff and supplies, I'm talking to somebody that I know that I've met before, that, you know, we're all colleagues in the same system, and it's not just a random phone call to some number.
You don't want to get to a disaster and exchange business cards there and find out who does what at the time of a disaster. They need to have those discussions in the rooms, in the training exercises before, and there is a lot of focus on that in the state.
I think preparedness is a local issue fundamentally. Now, there are resources at the federal level, there are resources at the state level, but preparedness itself, people on the ground, boots on the ground, that really gets done at the local level.
Aircraft touchdown is veered abruptly. It appears we have fire. All vehicles respond.
Every fire department on an airport that gets FAA funding has to be able to respond to a fire incident within 3 minutes, anywhere on the airport. It doesn't matter whether you have 1 station, 2 stations, 3, but you have to be there in that amount of time. That's just one dimension of the emergency response continuum that we deal with, but I think it's illustrative of the fact that there's a lot of training that goes on every day out there that people are not aware of, that they just take for granted, that provides a safe environment for them.
Indiana's district concept is a model that other states have come to study and emulate. And even beyond that, Indiana has drawn national attention for a couple of other preparedness assets. The first is the Muscatatuck Training Center, which is set up to train for fire rescue, collapsed structures, gas explosions, and more.
We're very privileged in Indiana to have the Muscatatuck Urban Training Center, which is down in Jennings County. That complex is just a tremendous opportunity for us to put real-life scenarios together. People use this from all over the world, not just Indiana, but all over the world.
It's a completely self-sustaining environment for pretty much any natural disaster that they can dream up, and it gives us opportunities to train for real-world incidents without the pressure of real-world incidents.
That really tests our first responders in a little bit of an uncomfortable atmosphere that they're not used to, because the training opportunities in Muscatatuck are just unbelievable, and it's a great asset for the state of Indiana to have sitting literally in our backyard, to have this piece of property down there with the logistics and the support staff to train our personnel.
Muscatatuck's recognized at a national level as one of the premier training sites for first responders and National Guard.
Those kind of ongoing training events just really hone the skills of the responders. How we have trained is how we're going to perform. And so when you see people who have been through extensive training, they tend to perform differently than people who are doing it for the first or second time.
Indiana hospitals are no different. They created a centrally located hospital preparedness training center in Plainfield, Indiana, where district hospitals could prepare together in intense mock disaster situations.
Indiana is probably one of the only states that has kind of a central location with a hospital preparedness training center. So fundamentally, everybody goes through a standardized, every hospital has the opportunity and obligation to send a group of their command staff or their administrative teams to a specific training center in Indiana.
We get folks away from the environment where they're working every day on the day-to-day so they can concentrate on what's it going to be like in a disaster, have we done these things, and they can see what other hospitals in their districts have and have not done for preparedness. So it's not just individualized training, it's group training, and you can learn the best practices and where you need to increase by taking it to a neutral site.
So just as importantly as we take NIMS and the things through the federal FEMA guidelines, we have a standardized system within the state, so we all know how each other is going to operate. We all know and speak the same language when it comes to these kind of situations. And I think that's one of the foremost things that brings us ahead of some of the other states in the United States, is that we have a little more formalized, standardized training system, just so that everybody can be together.
Through years of planning and training, Indiana has clearly become more prepared. And when a series of tornadoes hit Henryville, Indiana in 2012, it was all put into action.
I think it was a great gauge. From the district standpoint, I believe this is probably one of the first activations for the district concept, for the incident management teams to actually be deployed by the state of Indiana. There has been years, literally years of planning and training in order for our personnel to get to that point where they could deploy as a team.
The district concept, it's that pre-planning, pre-organization of what we can bring. I know I have 20 law enforcement officers with 10 squad cars I can bring and have available right now. I've got engines, I've got tankers, I've got firefighters, I've got hazmat responders. I have those numbers, I know what they are. If that's what you need, I can have it and have it to you in a matter of hours.
All of the hospitals that were down there were ready to go. They had all their staff in place, their equipment ready to go, and were actually over-prepared and ready when the storms hit. And they didn't actually see all the patients that they could have seen because of their readiness and their preparedness.
Despite strong improvement for mass casualty incidents like tornadoes, there are headwinds for those who prepare Indiana. One identified weakness in the state is the lack of trauma care. Seriously injured trauma patients often need urgent care within 60 minutes of injury. That so-called golden hour has enormous impact on survival rates. However, Indiana has a limited number of trauma care hospitals, and most are located in major urban areas.
trauma centers in Indiana historically developed where there was economic feasibility to have a trauma center. You had the population, it was a working population, you had the interstates, you had access to residents, medical schools, to big facilities. So you saw them develop in Indianapolis, where we have 3, South Bend, Fort Wayne, and Evansville, our biggest cities.
But getting appropriate patients to the appropriate place in a timely fashion is the problem. You know, the trauma centers here are only in pretty much the biggest cities. Sometimes that's 50, 60, 70, 90, 100 miles away from some of the smaller hospitals. And we use helicopters quite a bit to do that. But in Indiana, the weather the way it is, we can't fly everybody everywhere they need to go, and it's not always, you know, the best use of medical dollars to use helicopters, and I'm a big fan of helicopters.
The state legislature has tasked the Indiana Department of Health to create a trauma care system, but has put forth no dollars to actually build facilities.
Illinois has a trauma system. Ohio has a trauma system. Why are we not part of this? Why are we that far behind? And I think it took a lot of people to realize that we're not caring for patients as well as we could be. It's not that we don't have the resources, we just haven't had them organized in a good, logical way.
We do have to depend on a lot of the major hospital systems to decide, yes, we want to create a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3 trauma center in this region or this area. We don't have the money from a State Department of Health to go set up a trauma center. We just don't. It wasn't part of it. The legislation was create a trauma care system. So again, we have to work with our partners in the state of Indiana and say, well, here we see there's a need in your region for a level 1 trauma center, and try to work with the hospitals or the systems in that area to say, here's the data, here's what the opportunity is for you all, here's why it would be a good thing for you to do, because again, to be truthful, hospitals have to even more and more make sure that they understand the financial risks that are in place if they set up a trauma center.
There's no strategic plan and there's no government input or mandate to have hospitals in certain areas. All of Lake County doesn't have a trauma hospital yet. And that's an economic issue. There's a number of reasons that that's not there yet. Why we have 2 in certain towns is an economic issue too. You're going to have 24/7 surgical capabilities. So you've got to pay some people, an orthopedic surgeon, a neurologist, a trauma surgeon, to be on call or to be available because they're not doing this for free. Indiana's made their trauma system voluntary. Some states have required the trauma system be developed and have actually assigned districts and assigned hospitals those responsibilities and put funding out to help support them. Indiana has not been a state to legislatively fund trauma, so it's been a voluntary economic self-generated.
While financial issues cloud the solution to trauma care in Indiana, they also put our overall preparedness level in jeopardy. The funding for high levels of readiness is being reduced.
We have to face the fact that these federal dollars are not going to be continuing at the same rate at which they've been coming. And so we have to make sure that whatever configuration of task force capability that we have in the future, that it's commensurate with the resources that we have.
Well, one, this has been 100% federally funded. There have been no state dollars involved in preparedness, period. Sequestration did impact us from a preparedness standpoint. Our budget there was cut by about 6%. So we did receive a cut. But I continue to tell our people at Indiana State Department of Health, and whenever I'm out in the local regions, be prepared for less money.
There is a concern because training takes dollars and takes resources. With what is happening with kind of the fiscal crisis at the federal level, there are diminishing federal dollars coming to our jurisdictions to provide resources for that training. And so how will communities, states, and local jurisdictions continue to put a focus on the training?
Why would you stop that training? You know, if you quit, then you become not prepared. The minute you stop training is the minute you're not prepared any longer. Just because there's not a threat or something that didn't happen yesterday doesn't mean it's not there.
So what will happen to preparedness? The states may have to say, okay, this is valuable to us, so we may have to consider putting X amount of dollars into preparedness. Local communities may have to say that. The good thing is hospitals have been a phenomenal partner in this. They really have.
We all have to have stockpiles of things, and we have to have a lot of education and training for staff. And hospitals these days just don't have extra capital to throw towards things that don't necessarily make them money. It's necessary, but if it's not cost effective, there's cuts going on everywhere. So it's really important to be able to use grant funds to subsidize quite a bit of the training and the preparedness or readiness of the facilities.
They are kind of taking up the slack. Now, is that a challenge for hospitals? Yes, it is, because they've got their day-to-day business to take care of, and their financials are getting tighter and tighter, and so they may not have many extra personnel. People have to take on additional responsibility for preparedness, and it takes time to practice when you set up a drill. It takes time, commitment from nurses and staff and so forth, and observers to make sure that things go right, and so it takes time away from their regular duties that they're not really getting paid anything for preparedness. They really aren't. They're getting paid to take care of patients.
You'll notice what happens is when a disaster happens, the government will push in a bunch of money, for training, because it's right there, it's in front of us. It's like, oh my gosh, we have to, push training. And then when that threat is not imminent anymore, or you don't think about it, they pull the money back.
As chair of the House Subcommittee on Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Communications, Congresswoman Susan Brooks held a hearing in August 2013 in Carmel, Indiana, to review preparedness in the state and to learn about new or underreported threats.
But if you want to say what keeps me up at night, it's not nuclear weapons or an anthrax exposure, it's influenza. If we have an outbreak with a serious strain of influenza, one coprotein change in the vaccine does not confer immunity to the vast majority of people, and it's highly infective, we're going to have 50+% of our healthcare providers sick. And that includes the nursing homes. Do you think our support teams are going to show, our people like our porters and housekeeping and food services and all those people that end up being sick are going to show up to work, especially if you have something with a high mortality ratio. Mm-hmm. So I think the entire infrastructure collapses under that situation.
And the nature of threats keeps changing.
We're going to be holding a hearing in the future in my subcommittee in Washington, D.C., focused on cybersecurity. And if we were to have a cyber attack and that could possibly take down power systems, water supply systems, telecommunications systems, hospital systems, that is something that I think most first responders are concerned about, how we will respond to cyber attacks.
We base our training on an all hazards approach. So basically it's a very broad training and exercise program that allows us to have a very broad knowledge of a lot of different types of incidents. So like I said, as an all hazards, but as the Sandy Hook, we've involved more active shooter training. We're working more heavily with school corporations now. It's become definitely a greater emphasis. So we bring that into the fold and make sure that we incorporate it into our training programs.
We have to keep in mind what's going on around the country, what's going on in the environment around us. An active shooter is a perfect example. One of the things that we did at Lutheran Hospital this year was plan for active shooter type events. The involvement and the interaction with staff leading up to this exercise was something that I'd not seen before. Everyone in the hospital was engaged. They were all interested in it because we had seen incidents like that happen around the country recently, and all the staff really wanted to know how they could protect themselves in the workplace as well as in other environments that something like that may occur when they're around.
As the bill for training gets pushed back and forth between government, private sector, and other participants, the citizens of Indiana sit at some degree of risk, and with a difficult question to answer about how much we want to spend to have Indiana prepare.
You always drill, you always plan, you always learn. We turn people over, and every time we turn somebody over as administrator or command center person, emergency response people, you've got to retrain and re-drill, because you're never ready for a disaster. You're only as ready as your preparation has been.
It is a community issue, and how does the community step up the private sector, whether it's businesses that can assist in times of disaster. And I think what we have found in this country is that the private sector, the nonprofit and non-governmental agencies and nonprofits who come together have to support government. This is not government's role alone. We are going to have to come together to not only make sure we're safe, but after disasters in particular, respond as a community. And so we just have to continue to ask the question, are we prepared? Have we done enough?
I don't think there's necessarily ever an end point until bad things stop happening. Like I said, we can't close as a hospital system, as a healthcare system. We have to be there no matter what happens, whether we're working out of our beautiful new facility or whether we're working out of tents in a parking lot. We have to be there to take care of folks. We can't quit. There's no punt in this game. We have to go. So success would only be measured in hindsight, I guess.
Indiana Prepares was made possible by contributions from the hospitals of Indiana Districts 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and by the Lighthouse Readiness Group.